Today we're taking a look at the final Star Wars pack for Pinball Fx from Zen Studios. This is Star Wars Collection Volume 2. Now the first table we're doing is The Force Awakens. Now that is following the film of the same name, primarily focused around Rey and the Tatooine-like planet she started on, whose name I can never remember. And basically is kind of building up towards her basically leaving the planet and then going to try to help save the galaxy from the First Order, more or less. The table I thought was really cool. It definitely brought back Tatooine vibes, very similar to the Return of the Jedi table that we did before. And so I like that about it. But other than just kind of being a skin for the story for that movie, I felt like that there really wasn't enough going on that planet to really justify doing a full table on it. At least for that first planet's concerned. Now the whole story, I totally get, makes sense, but I think that it should have been, kind of have different sections related to different parts of the movie, similar how the Return of the Jedi table was. But as a standalone table, story aside, I think it was a really cool looking table. I love a lot of the dust effects as it's moving, and definitely can rack up a decent score here. It's not one of the best score-wise, but it definitely is enough to satiate my score greed. And overall, it's a gorgeous table, and found that it wasn't thrilling or super exciting, but it wasn't a bad table either. Next is Star Wars Rebels, and that focuses on the animated TV series of the same name. And I believe it takes place shortly after the Clone Wars, after Anakin becomes Darth Vader. But I'm pretty sure it predates A New Hope in the timeline. I don't know for sure. Don't quote me on that. But aesthetically, I thought the table looked fantastic. Definitely brought up a lot of the elements from the show. The very few that I'm aware of, because I've never watched the show. But it is a gorgeous table with a lot of really cool ramps and effects and events that happen throughout. This one definitely is one of the better ones in the pack, and definitely see myself playing this one a lot more than most of the other Star Wars ones for sure. Next one on the list is Might of the First Order. Now, basically, this whole table is centered around the First Order, or basically the replacement for the Empire. I definitely like the dark motif to it, and I think that probably would have been more excited if it was actually a one based on the Empire itself. I know that most of the tables in this pack have to deal with the 3 movies that came after the original trilogy in the timeline, but I think that would have made for a better table. Now, that being said, those fire effects are really cool, and hitting certain things will kind of interact with them. The table itself, though, was surprisingly quite a bit of fun. I love, like I said, I love the look of it. Like I've mentioned previously, I'm definitely all about the dark side of the Force, and I typically choose villains when it comes to anything. But aesthetically, this is definitely a great table. It is a good amount of fun. Some of the ramps, though, were a little difficult to hit consistently, but not so much that it was a big detraction from the table. So overall, I enjoyed this one, and on to the next one.
Prepare for docking. Your orders.
So the next one is Rogue One. Now this one follows the movie Rogue One of the same name, and basically what I've seen most people agree is probably the best Star Wars film outside of the original trilogy. Honestly, I would say I probably agree with that as well. Wasn't a big fan of the prequels or the re-release of the original trilogy with the CGI effects added in, but I definitely think that this was one of the better films. The three that came after the original trilogy, all three of those definitely felt like they were too formulaic and just not enough heart to them. Where this one was a great blend of espionage and overall story and character development, and so I definitely would agree with that overall sentiment. Now, as far as the table goes, I found that most of the points that I could figure out and most of the missions and stuff seem to be centered around that back area, so I spent most of the time trying to get the ball up there and triggering that. Once you get it to bounce around up there, you do trigger some story events, and it's really cool when you do. I just found that hitting the very rear of that section without hitting any of those definitely can be a pain in the butt, but overall, the table was quite enjoyable. I just wish that I got to see more of what this table might do, because like with that part right there, I end up triggering that a couple times without actually completing it, so I don't know what comes next, and definitely looking forward to seeing what that is. But overall, this one's definitely one of the better tables in the pack, and I definitely enjoyed it. So this one is The Last Jedi, now obviously based on the film of the same name, which was one of those three that came after the original trilogy. And the bulk of this table is pretty much centered around Rey training herself, and the struggle between the light and dark, and definitely found having this kind of bonus mini tables definitely added to it quite a bit, and trying to get there intentionally definitely became my main focus, and I think added a lot to the overall enjoyment of the table as a whole. For a movie-based table, this one's really good, at least in my opinion. And the ramps, the challenge, some of the different features, definitely are up there on this table. It's got a good amount of challenge, but again, it's not so much that it feels overwhelming. And I would say that this table probably is second best out of the entire pack. One of the last ones that we're actually going to look at is going to be the best one, in my opinion. But this one definitely does better than the bulk of the ones in this pack, as well as compared to most of the ones in Volume 1 as well. So definitely worth playing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And on to the next one. So this one is Act 2 Island, and so this one, pretty much the entirety of this is Rey's training on that island, where she drinks the blue milk with Luke and works with Luke, and kind of comes to grips with her own ties to the dark side, and as far as innovation and being vastly different than all the other tables in general, this one definitely is probably the most unique as far as how it works with those ramps that kind of are feeding into each other on the backside, and some of the loops and ramps and stuff like that. Really enjoyed this table just for that aspect alone. The story didn't get too far into, so I'm not really able to see, what all that entails and goes over. But overall, this one definitely was a really enjoyable table. Had a great time, and definitely look forward to seeing what else I can do with it. The next table is the one called Solo, which is based on the Han Solo movie. Try to say that 3 times fast, but showing the original design of the Millennium Falcon and the events that happened in that. That movie had a lot of promise. I really enjoyed the ties to the underground organization that was like doing the black market dealings. I can't remember their name, but I know Darth Maul and I believe his brother were part of that. And the main villain from Shadows of the Empire was tied to that as well, from what I recall. So I had a lot of hope for this table. Sadly, I didn't get too far into it to really experience most of what it had to offer. But the lanes, this is one of those ones where the lanes kind of felt a little bit off as far as their placement. Where I consistently had trouble hitting the ones that I wanted, but mostly those blue striped ones in the center. And so, because of that, it definitely, took away from the experience. But, it definitely wasn't a bad table, a good story that it's tied to for sure, but just didn't get to see enough of the table to, really tell if this one's going to be worth, much play or much effort down the road. So next to last, this one is Battle of Minden. Probably butchered the pronunciation of that. This one, for aesthetic alone, gameplay, everything about this table, I absolutely loved. This one was an absolute blast. Loved just the overall, war-torn aesthetic. Now, I'm not familiar with this battle by name, and so I'm guessing this is one of the ones that took place in the final trilogy, but I don't recognize what it is, and so it felt like its own standalone. Now, there was a lot of really cool stuff that did happen on this table in a very short time. Unfortunately, you're not going to see all of it, but you are going to get to see one of the walkers come up towards the end of the video. And just to make sure that you actually have time to see that, once I'm done talking about the table, I'll go ahead and let this one play to the end, so that way you can actually see it. But overall, this one is my favorite table in the pack. Just between ramp placement, execution, overall look and aesthetic, the background stuff happening, the battle that's happening there, kind of unleashing the commandos to fight and things like that. Just absolutely love this table. This one is by far the best one out of both volumes, and just had a great time with this one. So look forward to playing it again. Now, I'm going to go ahead and shut up so that way you can actually watch the rest of the table and see the other things that we triggered and unlocked during this playthrough. But definitely looking forward to playing this one again.
One down.
The Mimbanese forces have just increased.
They're slaughtering us! Always have a backup plan. The Empire does not tolerate failure. That was close.
Join now. Enlist today. Join the Empire. We are recruiting. Great.
Keep those rookies coming.
Prepare for an incoming attack. All drained.
The Empire is counting on us. Let's have a backup plan, just in case. Bring in the heavy artillery. Dig a new trench over there.
Great. The penal pit welcomes all unmotivated soldiers to sway their attitude. Whoever leaves the pit alive wins. Prepare for an incoming attack. We have lost a unit.
And now the final one in the pack is the Calrissian Chronicles. Now, if it wasn't obvious by the name, it centers around Lando Calrissian. Now, the version that we see there is the one from the Solo movie. From what I understood, he was supposed to get his own Solo movie after that, but it seemed to have just dropped off the face of the planet, or it came out and I just never saw it. Both are definitely possible, but I don't believe it did come out. But, it kind of goes over him losing the Falcon, playing and using the Falcon, gambling, and all the main events that centered around Lando through the entire franchise. So we have the Billy D. Williams version there, in the actual face of the board. Overall, I definitely really liked how some of the ramps played and just the overall feel of the table. It definitely was a stark contrast from the previous one, and I went directly from that one to this one when I played, and this one was just so much different. I think that following the other table with this one definitely was a nice palate cleanser at the same time, and kind of showing more of the light side of Star Wars. Pun not intended, but overall, definitely had a great time with this one. Really liked some of the ramp placement and some of the event stuff that was happening. Overall, it quite surprised me. I thought this one was going to be very boring, because Lando was never one of those characters that I really cared about beyond the history that he had with Han, because Han was by far one of my favorite characters, but he's never really one that I cared too much about. But even so, I definitely found this table enjoyable and had a great time with this one. But that's it for these packs. Overall, definitely getting the pack is going to be a win if you find it on sale on May 4th. So May the 4th. The pack was only for about $8.50 on Xbox, and so if this is a pack that you're interested in playing, and I would willing to bet that the next May 4th you're going to be able to get it at that cheap. But if you can't wait, the $30 price tag seems definitely steep, but honestly, it's well worth it for the number of tables and the level of quality and amount of enjoyment that I got out of it. I definitely would have paid full price for these, but thankfully I didn't have to because I'm cheap, and so I got to experience all of this at a fraction of the cost. So definitely worth picking up and giving it a play. And out of the two volumes, I think Volume 1 was by far superior, but again, this one did have the best table out of the two. So that's it for this episode. Thank you guys, as always, for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.
Smuggler? Such a small word. I'm more of a